So the music of that song was written for us on request by the great cabaretist Gerhard Brunner, who called himself the Viennese Tom Lehrer. Except, unlike Lehrer's limited output, the number of songs that Brunner wrote was over 3,500. I translated about a dozen of them into English. He translated a couple of mine into German. The piece that we just sang for you was originally called My Opening Song, and it was written to a posthumously published lyric of that name by Frank Loesser. Brunner translated all the major Broadway shows, and he told us that at the Austrian premiere in Vienna of one of Loesser's shows, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, he was dining at the best hotel in town with Loesser and his wife, and she was complaining about everything. She went to the bathroom, and Frank leaned over and said to Brunner, "You know what George S. Kaufman called my wife? The evil of two Loessers." We asked her for permission to use his lyrics, and she said, no. So we wrote our own to Brunner's music, written for us. Now, in a moment, we're going to hear music by a composer who was inspired by and worked with Frank Loesser. But first, we'll have two songs that I wrote back in the 1970s to classic Elizabethan love poetry. The first is Gather Ye Rosebuds While Ye May, Robert Herrick's Advice to Virgins, which I set while on tour with the Metropolitan Opera in 1977. I was sitting on a plane next to a chorister named Luigi Marcella, and I asked him, "What instrumentation do you hear in your head reading this poem?" "Mandolin," he replied. Because, of course, the text reminds one very much of the Serenade from Don Giovanni, uses the mandolin. And we were doing that on that very tour. We don't have a mandolin today, but if you know the Mozart opera, you'll recognize the reference made to it in my music. The other poem, by John Suckling, was my first composition as a graduate student at Cornell, reflecting an on-again, off-again relationship that became my first marriage. Both songs will be sung for us by my newest student, Dan Barna, who will also be conducting the finale of this concert.